Wonderful. And I just want to welcome you now all to our workshop tonight. I'm really so delighted and honored, honestly, to be in this space with you. And if you're here, I think you probably know about the Nuclear Ban Treaty Collaborative's campaign to bring attention to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons as a crucial tool that we have to wage peace in this world. And that campaign is being led, managed by the wonderful Sophia Wallman, who's also on this call, and I am assisting her in that endeavor. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yasmeen, who is going to lead our workshop today. Thank you, Yasmeen.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you all for having me. Some familiar faces, some new faces. I am really, really excited to be working with you all to help you get coverage not only for your campaign, but for the broader goal of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I think really honored to share the space with you and share some of the knowledge I have. I am going to be doing a bunch of talking, but also soliciting a bunch of questions from all of you throughout. So I'm going to start. I'm pretty sure because all of you are here in the Zoom room with us, you might have used Zoom before, but just in case, I'm going to start us off. I'm going to share my screen and then start us off with, oh no, can I share my screen? Yes, I can. Hopefully everyone, can we see, is it the full, Emma, can you give me a thumbs up if it's the full screen version? Yes, cool, wonderful. So for those of you who might not have experienced a Zoom screen share before, if it probably has just expanded and taken over your entire computer screen, the first thing you're going to want to do is press the escape key on your keyboard. That way you can access like all the rest of your computer and not just be stuck on my presentation, because at some points we are going to be asking you to edit some things. We're going to be working through press releases and things together and want to be able to access the rest of our technology. So with that, welcome to How to Pitch to Your Local Media and Get Your Movement Covered. So to start, this is, again, I'm going to do a really quick Zoom tutorial. This is what your Zoom screen looks like, or this is what it looked like last night when I took this screenshot of my Zoom room. The first thing to do is, ideally, we will all mute ourselves. I think we've all accomplished that, but again, the first thing you're going to want to do is just hit this mute button, and it should have a red slash through it, just like the video, if you have opted to turn your video off. The next thing that we're going to be utilizing during this training is the chat. So that chat button right there, if you click that, it will open a chat box for you. We're going to use this. So I'm going to pause for questions throughout this presentation. I do ask that you put your questions into the chat, because there's going to be multiple steps to this workshop. So it might be that I'm going to answer the very awesome question that you had later in the presentation. So I want to save room for different questions. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. That will help me kind of collect them all and maybe answer two at once if they make sense and work together. If you want to close the chat, you will go ahead and click this little caret right here and then click close. Do not click this X in the top right corner. That will leave you out of Zoom. We want you to hear, we want you learning with us. So make sure you just close the chat here. And it will close the chat and bring you right back. And then finally, again, when we ask you to work with us through creating some media advisories and press releases yourself, you will not click the X, you will click the minimize button so you can stay here with us when we start talking again. And that will just minimize your screen so you can see whatever it is you're working on. So, and if you have any additional questions with the chat that I just showed you how to do, you can ask the moderators and they will walk you through it. So with that, a little bit about me. Again, some familiar faces, it's really awesome to be in a room with all of you, but I'm Yasmeen Silva. I am an organizer, strategist. I've been working for progressive change for the past 10 plus years. And I'm here tonight talking to you about media because I have successfully gotten media to a bunch of my local campaigns. I've gotten local news outlets to come with cameras to abortion clinics. I've gotten local newspapers to restaurants in Harlem, all for different campaigns all across the country. So I'm really excited to share some of that with you tonight about how that can be effective and how you all can use that to further your goals. So that's a little bit about me. But I really want to hear more about all of you. So in the chat, if folks can share their name, their pronouns, what organization you're from, if you're with an organization, your location, and then a nice little icebreaker. What are you most excited about for a world without nuclear weapons? So I will give everyone a minute to introduce themselves in the chat. Don't be shy. I can see some of your names and faces. I'm excited to know who you all represent or what. Wonderful. All right. Yep, the huge investments in healthcare, education, and welfare. I hear that 100%. Welcome from Arizona. Oh, by the way, I am in New York right now, and we just had a really huge storm. So I hope you're having much better weather than we are right now. Less uncertainty. Yep, more equality. To tackle climate change. Yes, 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 yes. Wonderful. Well, I want us to kind of carry some of like what brought us to the room today, why we're excited for a world without nuclear weapons, because I think speaking from your heart when you're speaking to the media can be such a powerful thing. So whatever you wrote, kind of carry that forward, and we're definitely going to utilize that as we talk through our different press releases and media advisories. But with that, I would love to turn it over to Ralph Hutchison from Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance to talk just a little bit about the campaign thus far and why we're at an inflection and a media moment today.
Thanks, Yasmeen. Could you stop your screen share for just a second? Thanks. I couldn't find myself on here. So welcome, everybody. Glad to be here. By way of introduction, perhaps you noticed when Vladimir Putin started talking about using nuclear weapons, if anybody pushed back against his invasion of Ukraine, suddenly the media in the United States started to show renewed interest in nuclear weapons. Polls showed that more than 70% of the people in the country were concerned or very concerned. And they were saying, wait, nuclear weapons, are they still a thing? They are still a thing. They are an end of life as we know it on planet Earth kind of thing. They're an existential threat kind of thing. They're a what climate change will do in 30 years, nuclear weapons can do in one afternoon thing. They're this irrational megalomaniac might really pull the trigger thing. They're a $2 trillion new nuclear arms race thing. And finally, they're a time to think about the unthinkable thing. So one day last month, there was a long Sunday morning interview on NPR that caught my ear. 7 minutes of talking about the nuclear threat and what could be done. And the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons was not mentioned even once. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, ineffective after 50 years, was talked about a lot. So members of the Ban Treaty Collaborative, which is a loose collection of dozens of groups and even more individuals, many of you, with the support of the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability, has launched this mini campaign. And we have two goals. They're linked. They both will succeed only if we can generate grassroots actions. So that's where you come in. Goal one is to educate the public and the decision makers about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So the vehicle we have for that is this statement that we have prepared that many of you, maybe all of you, have signed. And goal two is to compel the media to include the treaty in all of the stories that they write about the nuclear threat, including the upcoming first meeting of states parties that will happen in Vienna later this month. Tonight, we're mostly going to talk about goal 1. So hundreds of organizations representing hundreds of thousands of people have signed the statement. And many hundreds of individuals have signed it too, including you. If you haven't signed it, please go to nuclearbantreaty.org and sign it. So here's the part that depends on you and what we want to walk you through the rest of this Zoom. On June 7th, a number of things will happen, but the heart of what will happen depends on what you do, what we do. We're asking you to issue a media release to your local media and also on your social media that says you have joined with people across the country in signing this statement. We're also encouraging you to have a very simple media release action at a federal facility. It could be a federal courthouse, it could be your congressperson's office, it could be a military base, anything that represents the federal government, to read the statement and say why you have signed it. If you don't have a federal place handy, any place that's accessible to the media will do. If your local media is as depleted as ours is in Knoxville, they might not even come, but we hope they will. We hope you'll get local media coverage. We're not counting on them to show up, though, for this to succeed. We're doing this also because we are building the strength of the movement, joining with all of you so we can say media events were held at more than 200 places across the country. And here's how we're backing you up. We will also do a national press release that notes your actions and all the signatories to the treaty. And we're running a full-page ad in the Delaware News Journal with the statement and the organization's signatures. Why the Delaware News Journal, you may be asking? Because President Biden gets a physical copy of the Delaware News Journal on his desk every day. So we're really lucky in this campaign. Let me see if I can get to the point where I can unshare my screen. We're really lucky in this campaign to have Sophia and Emma managing the day-to-day rollout. They're doing a million things at once. We're also lucky to have Yasmeen to guide us through the Zooms, and we're drawing on other expertise as well as we move forward. Tonight, we're going to show you where to find the resources you need. We'll take some questions later. We'll walk you through the preparations for the media release, and we'll draw energy from each other. The last thing I want to say is in the next 10 days, you'll also be hearing about part 2 of the campaign, which is a letters to the editor campaign that is not what you're thinking it is. So with that, I'll toss it back to you, Yasmeen.
Thank you, Ralph. That was really wonderful and much more dynamic than me sharing a bunch of slides, which I am unfortunately going to do again. So prepare yourselves, everyone. We're strapped in for a screen sharing ride today. So I kind of want to put a fine point on what Ralph said, and that is like why is one of the goals around media and one of those things about educating everyone. And I thought this quote was very prescient. And as you can read, if you can see, it says, whoever controls the media, the images, controls the culture. Media is so powerful and so important for a variety of reasons. And I think one of those ways is that it can educate thousands of people at all different levels of stakeholder, whether that's, an everyday person who hasn't thought about nuclear weapons until everything went down with Ukraine, to a legislator who might be dealing with this, but hasn't had the thought processes yet to realize that there is a vehicle that we can do anything about this with. So it advances our goals, as media advances our goals as a movement. Like I said, it educates and influences thought leaders and the public. Importantly, it also builds recognition and credibility. So if reporters come to your event or covering the release of your statement, you then become an expert that they will want to go to again. And also, you might know this, there's been research that shows if you have more electoral signs for a candidate out in a community, those people are just more likely to be voted for based on name recognition. And that's kind of also what you're accomplishing through media. The more you can talk about the ban treaty, the more you can talk about the goals of your movement, the more name recognition it has, and that builds credibility as an idea that people want to push forward and see change happen. And that's how it empowers the movement in turn. So to talk a little bit also about what Ralph talked about, so the ultimate goal is to get the TPNW and meeting of the states parties covered in this limited media campaign. And he mentioned two ways, and the largest one, and the one we're going to cover tonight, is local news coverage and how that feeds up to that main goal. And then, as he mentioned, there's a simultaneous campaign happening in addition that is national and international news coverage. And both of those feed into that ultimate goal of getting more coverage, more awareness, more education around the TPNW. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking about key action 1 here tonight. And so there are a myriad of different ways that you can get your movement covered in local media. Given the aims and the time frame and the goals of your campaign, I really wanted to focus in on 4 of those that I thought would be most effective and most doable. Again, this training could be a multi-day training if we went over every single different way, but I really want to focus in on these. And the first being a news release. And so as Ralph alluded, that's something that's happening on the national level. So this is used to announce an event that's newsworthy. And in this case, that's the release of your statement. This is a newsworthy event. It is a big topic. Groups in your community, you and others, care about this. Therefore, it's local news, right? And so being able to announce that release, it is in and of itself news. The next that we also alluded to is a media event. So folks in the community holding a rally, holding a vigil, doing something that can bring attention to the movement and to your specific goal that is out of the norm. That's something that's newsworthy and that reporters will want to cover. And just to preface, for the sake of this presentation, I'm putting, when I'm saying these things to you, I might not always agree with how reporters operate or what they find newsworthy or what they want, but I am relaying this to you as I found the best practices working with reporters who I might not share those values with, but can understand a bit of how they operate. So I just kind of want to preface that and saying I think a bunch of things are newsworthy that aren't always considered newsworthy. The TPNW, case in point, it's silly that we have to be fighting for news coverage about this, but we must and we will get it covered. So that's a media event. We take something and we turn it into a moment. The next is the letter to the editor, which is a really accessible way, and we will be covering that later this month. So I included it in this list here, but we're not doing it today. And the final thing is radio. There are local public radio stations, there are local private radio stations. Radio is still everywhere and it is still thriving, and they often are looking for stories. I do not go into radio very much in depth in this workshop tonight, but I do want to say that all of the training that we'll go through on how to pitch a story, as you would for television, print, magazine, it's online, etc., also applies to a radio station. And I've had really great success on being asked to come on and talk about my movement, talk about my issue, especially in the local community. So I would encourage you, you can even, because it's radio, they don't see your face, you can have a little script, you can read your press release, it's a really great way to get out into the community. And I just wanted to preface it here, even though I don't go into much detail. I also want to say before we dig deeper, I know there are folks here on the workshop tonight, you've probably been working with media for years, and there are some folks here where you've never worked with media and this is your first time. I want to meet us in the middle. So if you have expertise you'd like to share, I really welcome that. And if this is new for you, I also welcome your questions in the chat. So really excited to make this a holistic process together. So there were the different ways we can engage with media. And then there's what about that avenue you've picked? What's the hook, right? Because every reporter in our ever accelerating news cycle, like something that they're always looking for is the hook. What makes your story exciting for a reader? And it's unfortunate that we have to think that way because, again, things for the common good or other things, like they're not always exciting, but we should think through how we can make a reporter excited about covering our story. And again, for your campaign, there are many, many, many different hooks. I've identified 3 that I think work really well. So the first is new. So you all are releasing a statement that's really exciting and you've got demands and you want to make them known. So in this case, this is a fresh story. It's a breaking development. It's something like you will be doing either a media event or a press release on the 7th. Your statement is being released on the 7th. These work hand in hand to be new, fresh, and exciting. The second is local. So as Ralph said, there are hundreds of organizations representing hundreds of thousands of people across the country. That's local for wherever you are. If you've got 2 groups representing 300 people or thousands of people, however many people, that's a local moment. And local news, whether it's local television, local radio, local newspaper, they'll want to know. So while nuclear weapons and the TPNW is an international topic, people in your community care. You care. And that should be a hook in and of itself. And then finally, what's happening is timely. So there's a lot going on around the TPNW and nuclear weapons in general. We've alluded to Ukraine and the fact that this is on people's radar more than it would be otherwise. There's the meeting of states parties, which is coming up at the end of the month. And then also right after your statement is released on the 7th, I believe on the 12th, is the 40th anniversary of the Nuclear Freeze March, which until the Women's March was the largest demonstration in I think, maybe not in the world, in US history for sure. That's a huge hook. These are all timely things that you can use as to why it's important that the media covers your story using these hooks, whether it's one, whether it's multiple. I think in your case, you can kind of combine all 3 and you'll see how that was done in the sample press release that we have. But these are the way that you're going to really like get the attention of a reporter. So now I want to go a little bit into the nitty gritty of how how do you pitch a reporter? So I've kind of been talking in these like really abstract ways. This is a little more wordy, and the reason this particular section is a little more wordy is I'm going to be sharing this slide deck out after, so you all have access to it. So I wanted to kind of capture the main points here. So on how to pitch, whether it's local media, whether it's national media, whether it's international media, doing your research is going to be really important. You can just send something to the newsroom as a last resort, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the more directed you can make that pitch, the more likely it is that it is going to be taken up by a reporter, taken up by their editor, and then printed or shown, whatever the avenue is, that it will then get out to the public. And so along those lines, know who you're pitching. I'm going to get into this later about how the best way to make your media list. That's actually the final portion of this workshop. But even if it's a local paper, unless it's a blog, in which case like blogs are not off limits. Totally, if you've got like a local online blog that covers local things, it might just be one person, and that's awesome. But if you're looking for a magazine, a newspaper, again, a radio show or station, they might have more than one person. And so you want to make that pitch as tailored as you can so that they know that they can take it and run with it. It's in their voice. Next, know who from your group is pitching. So what I mean by this is ideally, let's say, I think I saw someone from Tucson, Arizona. If I'm making that up, I apologize. So let's say that there are 5 groups present tonight from Tucson, Arizona, and you are planning on holding a local rally outside of your insert federal landmark here. And there are 5 groups coming together to hold this on the 7th at, let's say, 3 p.m. While there might be 5 separate groups who are coming together to do this as that media moment, ideally, one of you will be sending the pitch to your local media. So designating that, whether you're all in the room tonight, whether that's in the lead up to the 7th, know who is pitching. reporters do appreciate, and I'll get into that, and you'll see in a few bullets, like you're doing reporters a favor by letting them know about these media moments because you're making their job easier. They have to go out and find and report on the news. You, by pitching them a story, are bringing the news to them. However, we don't want to inundate them because they're also very finicky people and they have a tendency to shut down if they're over inundated with the same kind of information. They'd rather have it presented from one person in multiple ways, and I'll get into that multiple ways in a minute. So that's what I mean by know who from your group is doing the pitching. And if it's just one group, again, designate person, go on, do it. It's going to be awesome. As I mentioned, if you can make the story more tailored to a reporter. So again, let's say I live in New York City, right? So my local papers are not a great example because they're actually also sometimes international papers, but that means that we might have somebody who covers politics. We might have somebody who covers national security. We might have somebody who covers local politics, federal politics, like you name it. And there's actually, I believe it hasn't passed yet, but there's a resolution here in New York City to make it like a nuclear weapons free zone. So that, like, if I was talking about that versus the TPNW, I might actually target a different reporter, even though it all falls under national security or politics. So you want to make sure that it's tailored, like the right person is getting it and your pitch is tailored to them as it can be from that angle. And then just one other thing to note on kind of like the big level of prepping your pitch and your press release. Reporters, like you might have gotten a reporter who's like, yes, this is amazing. I think your statement is so important. I want to get this out to our local citizenry. They have to then get that past their editor. So you taking the time to make like a coherent press release makes their job easier in getting past the hurdle of their editor. So those are some of the top line things. Part two of this. All right, so now we're kind of getting, so that was kind of top line background information for you to have before you start sending research you should be doing. Now we're getting into it. So the first part, and this is more tailored for folks. There's going to be two paths I'm going to talk about in a moment. One is if you are doing a local media event, and one is if you're doing like the news release. So the difference between those two again is one in the news release, you'll be talking about the release of your statement. And if you're doing like a media event, that means you're holding a rally or a vigil or one of those options. So this mostly applies if you're doing a media event, is the media advisory. And so it's a shortened version is the best way to think about it of your press release, and you send that out 1 to 2 days ahead of or you send it out as soon as possible, and then for sure a second time 1 to 2 days ahead of the event. Again, I mentioned you want to kind of reach out to the same reporter multiple times. They're busy people, they're on deadlines, you're not being annoying, you are being assertive, and I think that that's important within bounds, and I'll talk about that. Next is like once you've sent your media advisory, you can actually play with these. You can do them one of two ways. You can either send the media advisory first and call second, or call first, send the media advisory second. I always send the media advisory first, call second. The reason being is, let's say I get a reporter on the phone. I always start, hi, my name is Yasmeen Silva. Do you have a minute to hear a story pitch, or are you on a deadline? So again, reporters are often very busy people. Depending on the time of day you're calling them, it might be right before a story deadline that they have. They always appreciate somebody who is respectful of their time. They'll either say no, like you have 2 minutes to tell me your spiel, or they'll say, yes, I'm on a deadline. And then your follow-up question is, when's a good time to call you back? And then make sure you follow up with them. The reason you always call after sending a media advisory, and this depends on how large the local page is, it's always good to just let them know something's sitting in their inbox. That's what I always do. So if they do have, I would say, hey, are you on a deadline? I'd like to pitch you a story. And they say, no, I'm not on a deadline. I go, great, I'd like to talk to you about an event that's happening on June 7th at X time. If you look in your inbox, I sent you a media advisory yesterday at 5 p.m. If you open it up, you can follow along with what I'm saying and let them know and walk them through the media advisory. And then the final thing that's important with these phone calls is ask them if they will show up. Reporters are really hard to get them to commit to something. So asking them the question flat out, will you come or will you cover this? Well, it may seem like putting them on the spot, but it is a great, again, assertive but respectful way of letting them know that you mean business and that you're going to provide them with all the material that they need to get a good story. So part 3. So I was just talking about media advisories, and now I would like to talk about press releases. So a press release you will use in both of the instances that I mentioned. So the first instance, again, would be the news release. So that's you're again in Tucson, Arizona. Let's pretend you're not doing an event. You would say, hey, we have 5 groups who've signed on to this national statement. We care very deeply about this issue, but we're not having an event. So you would do just the press release. Or same example, Tucson, you sent your media advisory at least like as soon as possible after this workshop. And then one day before the event. And then you would still create, so tonight we're going to walk through and create a press release for everyone. So you want to send the timing of the press release is important. You want to send it in conjunction with your event or ideally right after your event. There are a few reasons for this. One is because reporters might show up. You might have sent that media advisory out to somebody and you haven't heard from them. This has happened to me. And you called them and you couldn't get them on the phone. You left them messages and you sent them emails and then they just show up at your event. And that's great. So the best thing you can do is have physical, if you have a printer. If not, really, we live in a digital age. People will accept you saying that you'll send them an email later. I always like to bring like what I call a media packet, and that's just like copies of my press release in case press show up. And again, I have used this because press has shown up without announcing that they would. And then you have a copy of your press release ready. But the reason I also like to send them right after, regardless of whether press show up or not, is because you can, if you are having an event, you can include photos. Today, in today's day and age, even if an outlet has a physical print copy, they often have an online version to go with it. In online versions, photos, images always do better. So especially in this tough media landscape, they're always looking for clicks, and anything with an image is important. So I would encourage you, if you are doing a media event, to make sure that you take 1 to 2 high quality. And when I say high quality, it's okay if it's on your phone. I mean more like action oriented or staged or getting signs in, some like good quality photos that you can include. And then you want to send that with your press release right after your event with the images included. That way, even if press didn't, and I've also had this happen where no one showed up to my press event. I took pictures, I sent my media release out right after the event happened, and it got covered with the photos that I included, as if a reporter had been there, but no one was there. So again, you really are making their jobs easier. And I know that that's frustrating to think about, like you're putting in all the legwork, but it does pay off for the movement. You are educating people and you are working towards that ultimate goal of getting more people educated, in this case, about the TPNW. So that's it on press releases. And that's why I personally like to wait to send them out until after I have images, if that's appropriate. Again, for those of you who are sending this out as like a news release with just the statement and not a corresponding local event, there's no real image for you to include. So don't worry about it. And you can send that out the day of. There's no specific time, but for those of you doing an event, I would recommend sending it out right after the event with some images if you can. So also on the day of, especially if you're doing a local event, I would call that reporter again, even if you haven't gotten them on the phone yet. 3rd time's, 2nd time's a charm, depending on how many times you've called that morning. In terms of people meeting deadlines again, this will work in your favor if you're an early riser. So reporters often do get to work rather early. I would say the window to start calling is between 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. That also depends on when your event is, but that's kind of a sweet spot to call, because they probably are like, it's too early before a deadline and they're not yet out in the field attending other events that day. Obviously, this changes by the type of media that it is. Some places might not have phone numbers. So again, if we're talking about online, I don't want you to be like perturbed if you can't find a phone number or someone to call. Again, I have literally not gotten in touch with people on the phone and still had coverage. This is more just if you can find a phone number, it is good practice to follow up with those things. So call the reporter the morning of and just let them know again, leave them a voicemail. Why not? The more they know about it, the better. And then the final thing I will say, working with media is a process. So even if your story isn't taken up immediately, let's say that reporter gets back to you 2 days after you did the event and they're like, oh, I had X deadlines, I couldn't make it, but I am really interested in your campaign. Take that moment to educate that reporter, because again, this is an ongoing campaign and you can start building that relationship with a reporter. So next time something comes around, you can have that relationship where you can call them on the phone or email back and forth with them. And I will say, again, another from one of my experiences is I have had a reporter miss one of my events. And then I think 2 months later, when I sent another media advisory around, they emailed me back right away. So it might not have panned out in that initial moment, but media is an ongoing process. And ideally, you'll be wanting to capitalize on any of those hooks, any of those moments within your campaign as you move forward. And now you'll have the tools to do so and the groundwork to do so that it can be an ongoing conversation between you and the media, and not kind of get in there in a moment, come out, and they don't hear from you for 2 years. It should be an ongoing conversation if you can. All right, I threw a lot at you. So I'm gonna pause here for a moment and see if anyone has any questions. I see one that was in the chat. And the question is, are we being counterproductive using two handle/names, nuclear ban treaty and treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons? That's a good question. And maybe let me ask a clarifying question if if at all possible. I think most people would understand the same thing. And in terms of, there's not a hashtag that I'm aware of that you all are using. I think if it were the case of a hashtag for social media, you would want to be extremely consistent with that. I think in a shorthand, like again, for a press release or a media advisory, you're probably going to want to use the same moniker throughout that press release or media advisory. So if you start with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, you should use that throughout the entire press release. You should use that, let's say, or you call a radio station and they're like, yeah, we'd love to have you on for a 5-minute segment. Whatever you write up or are reading off of should have the same thing throughout. Or if you're using different ones, explain how they're interchangeable. I think the good thing about media is like you have the space in the airwaves to explain yourself. And especially if a reporter shows up to your event, you can kind of talk through what you mean. Are there any other questions? Oh, I see someone has raised their hand. Louise, yes, hello. You are muted.
I was thinking about a more sort of not a process kind of question, but more like the question of psychic numbing, about getting people to just talk about nuclear weapons. I think we are in a prime moment right now where more people are becoming aware or are at least willing to listen. But would you have any suggestions about that? Like how to get people just to talk about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have another
yes.
question.
Yeah. So I'll address the first and then the second for sure. So I would say you're right. I think we are in a really primed for a really good moment to be talking about this issue. And I think talking about this issue in a really hopeful way, especially when we're talking about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, we're talking about the fact that the majority of the countries in the world want these to be eliminated. And I think it's a very hopeful message that like there's a show of strength. We are coming together. And I think as much as you can talk, obviously talking about nuclear weapons is existential dread. Oftentimes people, as you said, shut down, but the more we can reach people with hope and a hopeful message, the more likely they are to be receptive. That's my personal ethos. So I think if you like, I think there is a time and a place to say, if nuclear weapons were detonated, that would be bad news for humanity, right? But I do also think there's a way to say, we have the opportunity to prevent this catastrophe from happening. We have a vehicle, let's capitalize on that. And that's a hopeful, like you're taking that potential tragedy and turning it into a hopeful message. And so that's how I would say the best way to counter. And you might get a question like that from a reporter, like, oh, isn't this hopeless? And you say, no, we have a vehicle. The vehicle is there. We are bringing aware, like that's why we're out here at this rally today. We are we are spreading this message of hope, and that's why we stand here in solidarity together with the hundreds of thousands of other people across the country that are represented by our organizations, right? That's like perfect segue into hope. What's your second question?
Second question is, most of what you've been talking about is talking to a reporter. I mean, most of the time when I try to pitch something, I'm sending it out and calling people, many people, and not just one. So I was just wondering that that is what you mean, right? You're not talking about just, you're talking about trying to convey one person, but really lots of people.
Yes, that is a fantastic question. Thank you. Okay, so what I mean, no, truly, I'm not being facetious. Like that is a good question, and that was an oversight on my part.
Right, I tend to like overreact.
So yes, when I say one person, so here's another interest into the psyche of reporters, and any reporter who watches this in post, because I know this is going out on YouTube, please don't be mad at me, but they're like very territorial people. So like if they're, and this is why I kind of made to my home papers, right? In New York, you've got somebody who covers politics, you have someone who covers international politics, you have somebody who covers national security. I don't want to be pitching all three of them, because what happens when the international politics person and the national security person both show up, then they both pitch it to their editor. That makes them look bad. And then they don't want to work with you again. So my recommendation would be at each outlet, pick one person that best fits your thing. And ideally, you'll be reaching out to 5 different outlets. Like you'll be reaching out to local radio, you'll be reaching out to local news, you'll be reaching out to a newspaper, a magazine. But you should be picking one person from each of those places who most corresponds to your event or message, etc.
What about just sending and talking to, for starters, the assignment editors? That's what I do.
If that were like, that's what I'm saying is like everyone's had a different experience. Like if that's been working for you, then I would say keep doing that. And if you've been building that relationship, like I think one of the points I'm trying to make is you are like, this isn't just a one-off, like you are ideally built, like this is part of campaigning. And I think part of campaigning is creating a media presence and a media strategy, because social media can only get you so far these days, frankly. And petitioning at a farmer's market can also, like you might reach 50 people that day versus the 500 people that will read that story, right? So you can try different things, but this is what I found works for me in the past and avoided kerfuffles within editorial rooms.
Right. I think that things are developing in a really positive way, because like when I call the press, it's like I feel much more like we're intersecting with people, and that they really are listening, and that they're reaching the people who have the power, the people who get things in the news. It seems a much more vibrant kind of thing. So that is cool.
Yeah. No, thank you for your questions, Louise. I have another question here. What would be the best ways to convey a public service announcement / event such as a public library? What's with a sense of urgency with hope? I'm going to read this one more time because maybe I'm not fully understanding it. is this question, I'm not sure, is this question asking what's the best way to host an event at a public or sorry, whoever asked this question, would you mind explaining to me what you mean? Because and again, the question reads, what would be the best ways to convey a public service announcement / event, such as a public library, with a sense of urgency with hope?
Paul Gessler, if you can hear us, I believe that's your question, if you want to respond.
Yes, excuse me, but I'm trying to do that at our public library, and I'm trying to merge with an existing group, but I would like to, I think the suggestion you gave about the reporter could work, and I appreciate all the information you've been sharing, and I apologize for the unclear question, but you're doing a great job, and you've answered my question. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I do see some more questions coming in. Just how much time do we have left, moderator? Can you give me a time check just in total?
I believe we're planning till 8:30, and so that's 40 more minutes. 41 more minutes.
41 more minutes. Let me see. Let me do some quick maths on my agenda to see if we have
We
time
should
for some
probably
more
keep moving at this point. Yasmeen.
Yeah, I agree. Wonderful. So the next, I want to talk a little bit about those events. So for those of you who are planning to do a local event, what makes an event newsworthy? As I mentioned, those 3 hooks. So whether it's new, it's local, and it's timely, but in addition, like part of their media landscape today is providing great visuals and great quotes. So first you want to think through who's showing up. How big is your group? What does that mean in terms of the imagery? Is your group 5 people? So standing on the steps of this huge building, that might dwarf you versus going to a street corner and passing out pamphlets. The visuals of that are very different. So you just kind of want to think, what will this look like? How will this entice reporters to want to cover us, and how will it make us look powerful, right? Images are power. And if we can convey an image of like, this is a united front of people across the country calling for this, the more powerful the image will be. Are you going to make signs? Are the signs going to be printed? Will they be hand drawn? I mean, these are all questions. It doesn't really matter either way. These are just questions that you should be asking for yourself. But the idea is that for a media event, the hook is the event, and you want to make sure that that's as well thought out as possible and well thought out ahead of time, so you can explain it in your media advisory and your press release. So that, again, reporters are able to take that and run with it, even if they haven't been there in person themselves. And will you have speakers? So I would definitely recommend, whether it's for either press release for a news release, which is again just talking about the statement, or for a media event, which is you all getting together in person, I really recommend having like a spokesperson. You'll see Emma and I are going to provide samples in a moment for you to look at and then play with yourself in terms of the press releases. You'll want to provide a quote, and you'll actually, I know this is a little counterintuitive, you're going to want to provide a quote ahead of time. So like, let's say that you have, I don't know, a former nuclear worker, somebody who worked in a lab or a mine, who's going to be attending your event. You might want to ask them for a 1 to 2 sentence quote ahead of time and include that in your press release. Not in your media advisory, but in your press release, so that you're ready to fire that out when you're done. And even if they don't say it at the actual event itself, that's okay. Like a hot secret is like writing your press release is actually kind of giving the reporter the building blocks of writing a story, even if they weren't there. So you can really say whatever quote you would like, whatever really gives the most oomph to your movement in this moment. So think through those tonight and what could be a possible quote from who. Obviously you want their permission to like quote them, but think through who and what that quote could be. As I said, you want to be visible. You want to think about the different backgrounds and stuff. But with that, I'm curious, who is planning on organizing an action on the 7th? Can we get it going in the chat? Anyone planning currently on doing an event, whether that's a rally, a vigil, reading the statement out loud in a public place? Is anyone right now thinking of doing any events? Awesome. Press conference. Making your moment happen. I love that. If this has sparked something and you're now thinking about doing an event, I'm really excited. That would be awesome. DC, that's so many federal things for you to pick and choose from. Raytheon in Tucson, that will be super powerful. These are all amazing. And you don't have to have a powerful image like that. Again, like 10 people getting together on the street corner is just as powerful an image, like no matter where you are. So don't feel like just because you don't have a specific backdrop or location doesn't mean that you can totally still do this. Too short notice, that's fine. We'll still walk you through how to send a press release around the statement. Awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing, everyone, and we'll have some more time to brainstorm in a little bit. But so first, I quickly, before we share the samples with you and give you some time to work on these now with myself and others in the room to kind of talk about this, I want to share the difference. I've talked about a media advisory, I've talked about a press release, but kind of want to give you a little more in-depth on them before. So media advisory, this is really basic. It's the 5 C's: who, what, when, where, why. I like to think of it as an invitation to a party. You are handing a very basic out, like think about like when you used to get like party invitations on a cards with the lines of who, what, when, where, why, like a birthday party. That's exactly what this is. You are handing it to a reporter and inviting them to show up to your event with all of the limited but pertinent information on it. That's how I think of a media advisory. The press release, while they are definitely longer than your media advisory, they shouldn't be more than a page or about 500 words. The exception to that, I would say, is if you are including images, it is okay to go over that because I think images, again, in this day and age are super important for you to include. And if that puts you over a page, that's okay. But be judicious with your images. You don't want to attach 10 files, like pick the 1 to 2 best photos that you took that day. I also, the staff will be sending this out if they haven't already in the chat. Rethink Media has an amazing guide on how to write and adapt press releases. And I suggest you have that open for our next step of the way to refer back to, as my slides will no longer be on the screen. For this specifically, because we are targeting for local media, you want to include as many specific and local facts as possible. So again, like, what are the groups that showed up? How many people are they in your local area? Why was that area of significance? So again, in Tucson, I believe you all, I keep picking, I'm not picking on you, you guys are just killing it with this. So like you have the Raytheon bag, like that's specific and local and important. Why are you guys there tying in that information? And if we're thinking about a media advisory as the invitation to the party, think of the press release as the recap for those who missed it. Sad for them, but we still want them to have the information. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Emma and I'm going to stop sharing my screen to walk you through what the press release sample and the media advisory sample that we created looks like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yasmeen. I'm going to keep this short and try to do it as clearly as possible. And this is the part where we refer to some resources in an email that you got, I think, not long ago from me. So I'm going to share, I sent the email to myself as well. So I'm going to share that here. So you don't have to do this now at the same time as me. I think it might be easier to look at physically how it looks on my screen. Of course, your screen might look a little bit different, but it should be the same steps. I want to make sure there isn't anything over here that is obstructing your view. Okay. So the first step one, is to open the email that I sent out about an hour ago. I actually sent, I'm so sorry, half an hour ago, I sent a follow-up because there was one attachment that I didn't attach initially. But this is step one, and the email is called Save This Email. Whoops. Resources for tonight's press release workshop. And as Yasmeen already mentioned, we have sent you in this email both the Rethink Media tips. So that is in there. You have that in your inbox, as well as 3 different templates. You may not all use all of them. There might be 1 or probably 2 in many of your cases that are relevant to you, but I will go through them just to show you what it looks like to use them. So I'm going to actually start with the second email that I sent and click on it, because this is the media advisory template. And it actually, so it has 2 options for people to open. It is a Word document. And so if you have Gmail like I do, when you click it, there'll be this option to open with Google Docs at the top. And you can click that if you want, and it will take you to the Google Doc version. While that's loading, I will also show you that you can download it here. If you click this little arrow pointing downwards, you can download it onto your computer if you prefer to open it on Word. If you have, Word on your computer, you may also be able to do it here. Oh, no, I can't. So step 2, after step 1 is to get to the email. Step 2 is to open this document up, whether you prefer on Word or in Google Docs. And if we have trouble with this later, that's not a problem. We can help you. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that we can see. Now, this is the template, but step 3 here is actually not to edit the template yet. Step 3 is we're going to copy what's in the template and put it into our email and edit it there. It's not essential, but it's helpful because one of the tips that you'll see, and Yasmeen, maybe you mentioned this already. I'm sorry if I missed that, but sort of best practice for sending your media advisory or your press release, as I understand it, is to send it in the body of the email. That is, we're not going to attach it to an email. We're going to send it in the body of the email. So step 3 here is to highlight the entire thing. For me, I actually prefer to highlight it this way. And then probably everyone here knows how to do copy and paste, but I'm going to show on my screen anyway. We're going to go to edit and copy here. And then in my screen over here, I already have actually an email ready to go. Oh, where can I put this? There we go. So I'm going to open this new email. Oh, the closed captioning is covering it. There we go. And I'm going to paste it into the body of this email. And then once you've done that, you'll see that it's a template that's ready for you to fill out. It already has information in it that you will replace with your own. So I would put, my contact information here. I could either put, Emma Pike here as an organizer name, or if I'm an organization, I could put, the Emma Pike and Friends Peace Brigade, something like that, if that was my organization. And then here is where you'll also fill in, your title for the media advisory. So it doesn't have to be local group will rally, it could be, nuclearban.us rallies in support of the ban treaty, or Reed's statement at a state house, something like that.
Can I jump in for just a hot second, Emma?
Yeah, please. So
this local group will rally that you're going to change. This is whatever headline you would want the story to have. So think of it that way. Like if you were reading this in a newspaper or an online article, like what would the headline you would want to have? What would that be?
Awesome. That's a great way to explain it. Right. Okay. So then your headline will go there. And this, again, you would highlight what's already written there as an example, delete it, and then type in your own information. So this is the what, who, where, when, why, and that is sort of the media advisory. And then I'm just gonna delete that and show quickly what it might look like for you for the press release. Because this is where we have actually two options. I'll open them both. One says press release, statement press release, and I'll open that with Google Docs as well. But again, if you want to open it with Word on your computer, you can do that, and we can help you as well. And then I'm going to open this second one that says actions press release. So this is where you have a choice to make. I know many of the individuals and groups on this call are planning actions, and it doesn't have to be anything, big or fancy at all. It can just be, gathering some people and reading the statement anywhere really, but in a place of significance. So if you're planning an action, you're going to use the actions press release template. Which is slightly different than the other one that we have. And you can go through, it's exactly the same as the media advisory that I just showed. You can see where, you would put your own name, phone, email there, the headline that you would want to see there. And you would, fill in these blanks with members of this organization and location, address, etc. So a lot of the information in the media advisory will be the same here. We've also, included a couple of options for quotes that you can use if you don't have your own, but you can of course put in your own. So that's for people and groups with actions. But most people, if not all on this call, have signed this statement, right? And I saw some things in the chat, like we can't do an action on that day or at this moment, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. I think, first of all, you can, if you can't do it on the 7th, but you can do one on the 8th or something, that's great too. But if you want to send a press release just that your organization or you as an individual signed the statement, this is the template that you're going to use. And it's almost the same as the one I just showed you, but it just doesn't include information about an action because that's not the story that you'll be sending. So I am going to stop there and take any questions about how to do that. We can also take questions as we go because we're going to have a work period. But I think, yeah, time is running short. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Yasmeen.
Thanks, and thank you for walking us through that. So we now have 15 minutes for folks to work on this while we're in the virtual room together. And if any questions come up, if you want to bounce potential headlines off of me, or you're not quite sure yet what your event's going to be, but you want to start filling this in, like now, I'd love us all to take 15 minutes now to work through that. Is that correct, Emma?
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, as we work, we're going to have some music played in the background by Amy. But before we do that, I would love to just quickly, you don't even have to raise your hand, just you can unmute yourself and shout it out if anyone can remind me what step 1 is. So what we're going to do right now, step 1.
Open the email.
Open the email, yes. Okay, now you have your email opened. Do we remember what step 2 is? It's okay.
Open the attachment.
Yes, open the attachment. Yes. This is not really right or wrong answers. It's just to remind us. Awesome. Yes. So now you have your email open. You have your attachment open. Now what do we do? What's step 3?
Copy and paste.
Yes, exactly. Cheryl, excellent memory. We're going to copy the text that we want to use and paste it into the email so that it's in the email and not as an attachment. And then I think
you have to compose an email.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I missed that step. Thank you so much. Awesome. Everyone is ready to go. So I think just to let you all know, we're all going to be in this same virtual room together. We're not going to, break off apart from one another or anything. And so however if questions come up, however you want to ask them, whether it's technical questions for us, or, if you have a question for another, person attending about what they're planning or something like that, you can either use the chat, or if it's a technical question, you can also, just say it out loud, I think, if that's easier. And Amy's going to play a little bit of work music in the background for us. Did the music stop for anyone else? Maybe it's because Amy, can you hear us? Hold on. How are folks doing with their filling in the templates? Sort of a good, bad, in between. Awesome. Do we need a couple more minutes? Or do we think we're good? Because I know the next step, of course, is you have to figure out who to send it to. And I think that is something that Yasmeen will talk a little bit about next. So I want to get a feel for how we're doing. I think maybe it's time to move to the next portion. I might close out the work period and send it back to Yasmeen. But I also want to say here that if you have, if you come back to this tomorrow or next week, and you think, actually, I don't know, what to do here, or I have a question about this, please do feel free to reach out to us. In the same email that you got those resources from is great. So yes, I will pass it back to you, Yasmeen.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks everyone. So just a note that I'd like to say, so some people were sending me privately like some of the things that they're planning to do for their media event, and there are some awesome visuals and things that are going to go on around the country. And I want to say this should be included in your media advisory already. There should be a line for like visuals. If you're holding an event and you've got some really amazing, emotionally stirring images, like somebody mentioned that there are going to be people in hazmat suits holding signs and other things, like be sure to include what those visuals are in the media advisory. Again, in terms of making reporters' lives easier, like they might be more like, again, I'm talking from like the stance of a reporter. I think this is all interesting and all should be covered. But like, you need to hook them. Why is this interesting? Why is this compelling? So if somebody's there in hazmat suits, they're like, oh, I'm going to get pictures of people protesting nuclear war in a hazmat suit. Like, that's a crazy visual. Like, my boss will love that. Let them know in that, again, in that media advisory, in that invitation to the party, like what they can expect. Visuals can be really powerful on letting people know. So everyone who's getting creative that way, good job. If you're not, your event is still awesome. And like, again, I was sharing this in the chat, but like I had a media event that was covered that had 8 people that lasted 20 minutes. Like, it's really about just following up with the reporters and like being consistent. The other thing that I do want to share is share your event and earned media with the team. After your event, if you want to share images that happened with the team here to the same email, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, Emma, to maybe the same emails, not the same email, different email that will now go in the chat. Somebody is going to post what emails you should be sending your photos and your images to in the chat. And then also, if you do earn any media, so let's say that the next day your local paper or local blog or local radio runs something, share that. Because that's powerful and that's part of the movement. The more, if we can turn around a week later and say, we held 200 events across the country, we had X hundreds of thousands of people sign this statement, and we had 10 media hits, like that's a powerful thing. So we want to know, we want to share, and if Sophia can share those email addresses in the chat that folks should be sending that earned media and those images to, that would be wonderful. So I know we've talked a lot and given you some time to think through, like what you're going to be sharing with the reporters. I think that the one thing I have neglected until this point is like, who are those reporters? How do you find those reporters? It sounds like some of you are already adept at this or might even have media lists yourself. But for those of you who don't, let me walk you through it. And the first thing is I really encourage you to think outside of the box. There's no outlet too small when it comes to local, because like your community is diverse and have many different outlets. And the more we are able to get covered, the more we're educating people, the more people we can bring into the movement, right? So think through local TV stations, right? I mean, I've said these a bunch, but also like newsletters for groups you belong to. Maybe you belong to a church and they've got a monthly newsletter that goes out. you all can be covered in that. Maybe you're part of a local club. Like, you never know like what kind of media you can get. And again, like everything counts towards educating people and bringing more people and bringing awareness around this to people. For those smaller things, obviously there's not a reporter you're going to be pitching, but like still same principles apply. You want to share that story and convince somebody why you should be included in the newsletter. But for outlets, really a good place to start is like a simple Google search. And I'm sure most of you are probably already familiar with like the main newspaper of your area, but maybe there's actually like a political journal that you weren't aware of. Just typing in specific keywords like, I don't know, Santa Fe political newspaper or Santa Fe political blog might yield things that you didn't realize existed already. So I would encourage you to be expansive. Cover print, radio, TV, online. You want to be seen, and people are everywhere, so you want to be in all of the different mediums. I've talked a lot about reaching out to reporters directly. So smaller papers might not have a list of reporters, or you might have to dig a little bit. So sometimes on a newspaper website, they might have like our reporters, and then you can click it and it'll be very nice. And then it'll say this reporter covers local politics, and it'll be a nice little bow, and you click that person's email and it has their phone number, and that's it. It's the end of the day. Sometimes you might have to dig a little more. So sometimes what I like to do is if they don't have a list of reporters, if you go to like the politics section, I just keep using that as an example, whatever, or like maybe they have somebody who covers environmental stuff on the local paper. Like you might want to go there, whatever fits in best for your local context. And then they'll have a byline. So in your most local political thing, you see, oh, somebody wrote about Ukraine. That person is probably, unless they like are really for the war in Ukraine, then you might not want to ask them to like cover your thing. Again, be discerning with who you select. But like, let's say somebody has written about that, you can then probably find their name. And in this case, social media can be your friend. So you might find that person's name and you can't find any information about them on a local website, but you can type them into Google and find out that they have a Twitter account that you can message and say, hey, I'd like your email. I have a story you might be interested in. I actually did that. It's a very long story, but basically I got into a story about something because I hate Twitter, just like personally, like I really only use it when I absolutely must, but like I searched this person on Twitter and I then ended up in the story as an expert on this thing because I said them like, I have something to say about this and I think my voice is missing, and they included me. So social media can be your friend. It's not always like a big scary black box. And then think about other groups in your area who you could reach out to. They might have a media list already. There might be a local environmental group that you can reach out to who have a media list. And it might not be one for one on exactly what you want, but it might set you in the right direction. They might also know about other local media outlets that you haven't thought of. So be sure to reach out to our friends and allies in other movements. I think that they can be a great asset in times like these. And with that, I want to say thank you. If there are any final questions, I have time for 1 to 2. Otherwise, I do want to let you all know, as was said at the top of the meeting, later this June, I will be leading us through a letter to the editor training. That is another form of earned local media that, again, it's so expansive that it has its own session. And I want to thank you all so much for sitting through for this hour and a half. And I'm really, really excited to see all of the events and earned media that come out of this and how we can build the movement stronger. So thank you so much. If there are any final questions, yes, I do have time for 1 or 2.